Hello and welcome back to Film on High Reviews. Today we're going to be talking about the 1993 Japanese Yakuza film Sonatine, directed by Takeshi Kitano, starring Takeshi Kitano, Aya Kokumai, Tetsu Watanabe, and Susumu Terajima. The film tells the story of Murakawa, a mid-level boss in the Tokyo Yakuza who is sent on an errand to try and mitigate peace between feuding clans in Okinawa. So he heads out there with his gang, but things quickly go sour when they're ambushed and attacked and forced to retreat to a beach in order to hide out. And there, they sort of regress and engage in a variety of juvenile and childish type of pastimes, while all the while danger looms on the horizon of the coming gang war. So, what did you think of Sonatine?
This was a weird crime film. It's artistic, for one. Two, the way they depict the story. There's a lot of... The editing style is kind of weird, but it's appreciated because it kind of takes its time to actually tell a story, and it's not that it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it kind of depicts more a reality of, what it would be like to be an aging Yakuza boss, someone who's seen it all and now just wants to finally get a break time or something.
Yeah, it's a very different take on the kind of Yakuza crime film genre. The Yakuza film genre in Japan was already kind of a recognized thing. There were Yakuza films going back a very long time of all kinds of different styles. And Takeshi Kitano, he had sort of made a name for himself as a comedian in Japan. He was a household name. And in the late 80s, he kind of took a detour and became a film director. And instead of, directing more comedies and the kind of movies people would expect from him, he instead directed gritty crime dramas. His first film was Violent Cop. And then he made another film called Boiling Point. And this film, Sonatine, was kind of a turning point for him, another turning point, if you will, where it opened him up to a larger audience. And here, he's playing with the kind of Yakuza ideas and a lot of the recognizable staples of the Yakuza genre, but he's playing around with them and doing them a little differently. He's exploring it from a more kind of existentialist perspective. And yeah, like the style of the film, there's almost, I think, a significant influence from like European styles and stuff like that, French cinema with the editing and the placement, and it's a very kind of silent, somber, meditative film.
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting, Kitano, he plays these kind of, in his own films, he plays these very kind of stoic, silent characters, and in this film he does a lot of that, but there's also kind of a different side to the character, where when he heads to the beach, he starts becoming a bit more childlike and having fun. And even though we have, like, these wonderful scenes of just, the guys having fun on the beach, playing around, doing sumo wrestling and throwing frisbees and stuff, there is still kind of the inherent darkness. There's this kind of... The character of Murakami himself has almost this self-destructive thing going on, and at the beginning of the film, he kind of tells us that he's already tired of being a Yakuza. Like, he's already kind of pondering other things in his life, and then he's sent into this kind of obvious trap. Like, even from the beginning, he knows it's going to be a setup and it's not going to turn out right, but, the Yakuza code sort of dictates that he has to. And it sort of encourages him to maybe take a second look at his own life, getting a chance at seeing what that life outside the Yakuza would be. And yeah, like, it's kind of an interesting, like, cute concept, because the movie starts out like typical kind of crime movie fashion. We see, the gangsters doing their thing. And then about midway through in the second act, it just completely changes, where it just kind of becomes this beach film in a way. And yeah, Takeshi Kitano, the beach was something he used a lot in his own films. It was a powerful image for him. And in this film in particular, it's really kind of, symbolic of a safe haven for them, escaping the kind of chaos of the cities of Tokyo and Okinawa and all of this gang intrigue. And yeah, being able to just kind of become innocent again in a way, playing these little games, but there's still, like I said, the darkness. Like, Murakawa, like, at one point he plays like a little Russian roulette game with two of his subordinates, and you can tell that they're freaked out, you know, and he points the gun at his own head, and they think he's going to shoot himself, but, you know, of course, he fires the gun, nothing happens, gives it back, and they see that it was empty, so he was playing with them all along. But then he has a dream later that night where the gun actually does go off, so you can tell that even in his own mind, he's sort of almost got this...
suicidal thought.
Yeah, like this kind of, like, you know, ideation, I guess you would say. Like, it's definitely something he's thinking about. And, you know, I guess it goes with the kind of... the idea of, like, being a Yakuza and getting to that point in your life. And he has a really poignant line in the film where he's talking to another character, and he says that if you fear death long enough, eventually it becomes a death wish. And that's kind of a clue into his character. Like, a character who's sort of preoccupied with death. And that's what makes it even more poignant that he has this little kind of beach adventure where he's almost able to try and move beyond that. But even as he's having this carefree time, it's still something that's looming in the back of his mind. He can never quite escape it.
Well, that's what I kind of liked about this film, is that, yes, they're on the beach and it kind of takes a 180, but that 180 switches back all over again when this lone assassin comes in, assassinates one of his basically left-hand man right in front of him, and he just kind of stays silent for a second, goes back to playing frisbee. But it's almost as if this fun time, this one little space of time that he had fun, met this girl, you know, had a brotherhood or a family, you could say, around him and stuff. Once that was taken away, it really kind of ends with the point of him going back against the people that betrayed him, gunning them all down. And then you get the last scene of the film where you're just there kind of like, so he actually went through with it. But you ask yourself, why? And there is no answer, because that's in real life. Most of the time you won't get a real answer of, like, why did this happen?
Well, yeah, it's like, it's a different kind of concept. It's something you really have to, you glean it from watching the film. It's this kind of subtle thing that's in the background that kind of builds up. But yeah, there's a beauty and a lyricism to the film. They go to the beach and, you know, they have their fun times. And like you mentioned, there's the woman, the female character, who Murakawa saves from an assault that he witnesses, and she sort of becomes his companion. And again, like, you know, sort of having this little relationship, like indulging in a different kind of life. Mm-hmm. But again, like, the idea that you can never fully escape it, you know what I mean? Yeah. And the other characters are interesting too. Like, you know, we've got the Ken, the lieutenant, and the younger guy, because the funny thing is, like, early on in the film, they get attacked, so a lot of his guys get wiped out, and some of them just kind of leave and go back to Tokyo, so he's left with, like, a smaller group. Mm. And one of the younger guys he's got with him, Ryoji, he just kind of winds up sticking around, and it's interesting to see his perspective. Like, you know, he was probably someone who wanted to be a Yakuza. He's not quite as experienced as them, and now he's kind of thrust into this position where he's kind of stuck with them and has to be part of their little crew. So there's kind of that aspect of the film, too, like, this idea of the Yakuza and the kind of gangster lifestyle. There is, like, a subtle criticism of it in a way. Like, it's an interesting film because when you're making a movie about, like, gangsters or organized crime in general, it's a strange kind of thing to do because you run the risk of either glamorizing organized crime or you go too far out of your way to de-glamorize it and the movie becomes sort of preachy. You know, like, it's a tough line to walk. So in this film, he kind of favors a more sort of soulful or, like, you know, existential approach. It's more about a feeling. But there is kind of like a subtle, like, just the fatalistic nature of the film as it gets increasingly violent and increasingly dark. Mm. And yeah, the Ryoji's character is kind of key to that as he's observing this. And you can see that he is sort of not as into it as the others. Like, you know, he's apprehensive. So he, like, I think Kitano did something fascinating here where he managed to make a film about the Yakuza that it's kind of an honest portrayal of the Yakuza, but it's an offbeat portrayal of that kind of lifestyle where, you deal with the kind of the wages of sin and how it builds up and the violence. And like one of the aspects I like about it too, this is another thing that Kitano does a lot, the kind of suddenness of the violence and the casualness of it. Again, like, there's no grandiosity in a lot of it. It happens very suddenly and it hits kind of hard. And that's kind of like just showing the commonplace sort of violence that exists in that world, where it can come at any moment and you can never fully relax. And again, sort of making this idea of this kind of beach haven even more alluring, a place where you can actually go to escape from that. But like you said, eventually the outside starts to intrude in. They get tracked down, and even there, you can't escape all of that. It's a good movie because on one hand, yeah, you have the light side, but there's also this fatalistic darkness that hangs over everything. And even when they're having fun and doing these lighthearted things, that there's still, this still needs to be dealt with. We can't put this off forever. And like, there's the other character, the guy with the loud shirts that's always being criticized. You can tell that he's not into it. Like, he's business oriented, and he's really not liking the fact that they're sitting here on the beach and wasting time. And you can tell that he's particularly kind of annoyed with how his boss is not focusing on, the business or what they're going to do, and he's more having fun playing around. So again, sort of this idea of like, yeah, we can't stay here forever just messing around and having fun. Eventually we are going to have to confront this. So the film subtly builds towards that, and I love the way the climax is presented.
See, okay, we're going to go into spoilers here, but when they're on the beach, they're having fun, Ken is trying to shoot this frisbee. The boss is trying to shoot the frisbee, but he can't hit it, and he says, okay, Ken, try to shoot it. And then, so he tries to shoot it, lo and behold, he doesn't have ammo anymore, and that's when the assassin comes in and just stares Ken right in the eye and then shoots him. Yeah. But then Kitano is like sitting with the girl, they're pretty much hidden, and he just sees his, I want to say, best friend dead right in front of him. And I was kind of wondering, it's like, was this the representation of like his dream dying there and then? And that kind of informs why he did what he did at the end. He's like all alone and stuff.
And that scene itself is kind of a good metaphor for like him and his state of mind. Like, they're messing around playing the frisbee and shooting at the frisbee, and then when the actual threat shows up, there's no more ammo in the gun. So they can't even like really fight back. Exactly. Like, he can't even shoot this guy who just killed his friend, So it's almost like, yeah, he's been spending so much time just messing around and not focusing on the business that, yeah, he has neglected it, and now it's finally coming for them. And yeah, Kitano's treatment of violence is one of his most recognizable aspects as a filmmaker. Like, from his earlier film, Violent Cop, that was a film that was much more gritty and much more sort of direct. But here in this film, he presents it in a more, I don't want to say necessarily surreal or dreamlike, but there's a different, take on the violence. Like, he's trying to kind of show the poetry of violence, if that makes sense, and not quite in the John Woo sort of way. Like, John Woo also, he's a guy who was known for doing really intense action scenes and very slow-mo and the dubs, and there's almost a beauty to the way he does it. Whereas Kitano, the way he depicts violence is not quite beautiful, but it sort of fits in with just the rhythm of the whole film. It encapsulates the kind of the life and, the suddenness and how it can end. Like, there's a real depth to the way Kitano explores these ideas, but he does it in a way that's not preachy or overbearing. And yeah, the film has an artistic kind of style to it, and there's enough there for the audience to kind of make up their own mind about things, and that's what I really like about it. It's a film that made a pretty big impression. Quentin Tarantino was a notable fan of it. He helped secure a U.S. release for the film under his Rolling Thunder imprint. Yeah, I saw this film when I was a teenager for the first time, and because, at that time I was a big fan of Tarantino and movies like that, gangster and crime movies. And it definitely sort of weirded me out. I didn't know what to think of it, but watching it now, I definitely get a better understanding of the idea that Kitano was going for here. Like, these ideas of life and death and what it all means, and when you're sort of forced to confront that, how are you going to deal with it, and ultimately try to find some meaning and resolution to it all.
What this film kind of gives the vibe off for me is an impressionistic Yakuza film. So an impressionistic gangster film where, as you said, it's got this musical rhythm to it where, picture yourself listening to a song where, there's that one section where it's all kind of like, not intense, but it's got a good rhythm, then it goes slow, and then out of nowhere, there's just this shock of a sound where people are getting murdered and stuff like that, and then it goes back to the rhythm. So it takes you through waves, and I think that's the most important part with the beach. It's just things come in waves, and especially with this film, it's just like violence, goodness, and the way it ends,
contrast.
Just,
Well, the musical comparison is a good one too, because even the title Sonatine is a reference to a musical term called sonatina, which is a term when you're playing piano. The sonatina is when you're going to have to make a sort of definitive change, whether you're going to have to commit to being, classical or jazz oriented. So it sort of applies to the Murakawa character here in this position, forced to make a decision about what he's going to be.
Yeah.
Are you going to leave the Yakuza? Are you going to stay the course? Are you going to try something drastic? And it's sort of an exploration of those kind of ideas. And the exploration of a man at a crossroads in his life, I think, is really the best way to put it,
Quite literally.
Yeah.
Stuck at a crossroads. I'm not going to go too much into detail with that.
Well, yeah, because there is almost like a purgatorial aspect to it, too. Like, the beach is beautiful, and it is like a peaceful place, but at the same time, being kind of stuck there, not being able to leave, like, it works on a few levels. It's an apt kind of visual and narrative metaphor, I think.
Yeah. Overall, my rating for this film, 4 out of 5. One thing I really liked about this film, apart from the storytelling, was the visual aspect of it, where the cinematography that he uses, the shot placements, some of them can be a little bit awkward. Some of them, they linger on a single action, but it's more in the sense of like...
It's part of him trying to create a vibe, you know, and Kitano by this point was already experienced as a visual stylist. Like I said, he'd made a few films before this. And here on Sonatine, you can really see him sort of coming into his own. And a lot of the more recognizable tropes and ideas that would characterize his oeuvre, if you will, are really apparent in this film. And yeah, I'm a fan of Kitano. I love a lot of his films, but this one is my personal favorite. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a 5 out of 5.
All right.
This is a great sort of unconventional gangster film. It's not going to be a film for everyone. It is slow-paced. It is weird. And, but I just think it's great. I think it's definitely worth checking out. And especially like in an age where gangster movies have become sort of, boring and codified. Like, it's hard to get a unique take on that genre, And I feel like Kitano really did something remarkable with this film. So, highly recommended from me.
This has been Film on High.
Peace.
Later.